Today, we're diving into one of the most transformative and frankly intense periods in American history, the Jacksonian era. So, from about 1800 to 1848, the country was just gripped by this one massive debate over a single question: how much power should the federal government actually have? And tragically, woven into that exact same debate was the forced removal of indigenous peoples from their homes.
Almost everything that happened during this time really just boils down to this one powerful question. Should power be held tight in Washington, D.C., to drive big national projects and create a single unified economy, or should it stay local, with the states and the so-called common man holding all the cards? This one conflict shaped absolutely everything.
So politically, the whole landscape was shifting under everyone's feet. The old Federalist Party, it had pretty much faded away, leaving this big political vacuum. And right into that empty space, two powerful new parties rose up, each with a completely different vision for America.
And here you can see just how fundamentally opposed they were. On one side, you've got Andrew Jackson and his Democrats. Their whole mantra was limited federal government. They were all about being the champion of the common man. They pushed for free trade, and they were really suspicious of any concentrated financial power, especially a national bank. And then on the other side, you have the Whigs, led by Henry Clay. They wanted the exact opposite, an active, hands-on central government. Their American system called for a national bank to keep the economy stable, protective tariffs to boost American industry, and federal money for big infrastructure projects. You can already feel the tension building, right?
Now, this clash of ideas wasn't just some abstract political debate, It played out in a series of really fierce, high-stakes battles right there in Washington. And to help us keep track of all these major fights, we've got a simple little mnemonic for you. Just remember the letters BITT. It stands for Bank, Internal Improvements, and Tariffs. These three issues, they were the battlegrounds where this whole fight over federal power was really won and lost.
Okay, first up, B is for bank. The second bank of the United States was this incredibly powerful institution, but it got controversial and fast. Its critics, especially President Jackson, saw it as a tool for the rich, for the wealthy elite. They saw it as this concentration of power that was just fundamentally unfair to farmers and workers, and, in their view, totally unconstitutional.
And let me tell you, Jackson did not hold back. In 1832, when he vetoed the bill to keep the bank going, he called it a hydra of corruption. I mean, just think about that image, a mythical monster that grows new heads whenever you cut one off. That's how he saw the bank, a monstrous threat to the republic that had to be killed.
Next, we've got I for internal improvements. This was a huge part of the Whigs' American system. They argued that for the nation to really grow and connect, the federal government had to pay for things like national roads and canals. But the Democrats? Nope. They hit the brakes hard, arguing it was unconstitutional federal overreach. For them, if a state wanted a canal, well, that state should foot the bill. It was a true ideological standoff.
And finally, we get to T for tariffs. So first off, what in the world is a protective tariff? Well, it's actually pretty simple. It's just a tax on goods that are imported from other countries. The whole idea is to make those foreign products more expensive so you're more likely to buy things made right here at home. It's meant to protect our local industries. Sounds simple enough, but who it helps and who it hurts, well, that's where it all gets messy.
And this issue absolutely exploded with the Tariff of 1828. It was so hated in the South, they actually nicknamed it the Tariff of Abominations. It jacked up taxes on imported goods so high that it created this massive, bitter divide between the different regions of the country.
And you can see that split right here. The industrial North, they loved the tariff. It protected their brand new factories from cheaper foreign competition. But the agricultural South, they absolutely hated it. They exported raw materials like cotton and had to import a lot of their manufactured goods. So for them, the tariff just meant higher prices for everything, with none of the benefits. It felt deeply unfair.
The anger over this tariff got so bad, it sparked what we now call the nullification crisis. South Carolina, led by Jackson's own vice president, John C. Calhoun, basically argued that a state had the right to nullify, or just flat out void, a federal law if it thought it was unconstitutional. This was a massive direct challenge to the authority of the federal government itself.
Now, while all of these intense political fights were blowing up in Washington, there was another story unfolding at the exact same time. A parallel and, you could argue, a far more tragic story. This one was about land, expansion, and the devastating human costs that came along with it.
There was this relentless, almost unstoppable push westward. Settlers wanted cheap land, a fresh start, new opportunities.
And this immense pressure led directly to the Indian Removal Act of 1830. This was a federal law that it ordered the removal of all indigenous peoples living east of the Mississippi River. The main driver was the hunger for land, and then, when gold was discovered on Cherokee land in Georgia, that hunger turned into an absolute fever.
This timeline really just maps out how devastatingly things progressed. It starts with a federal policy of removal in 1830, then there's this brief moment of legal hope in 1832, a deeply controversial treaty, and then, finally, the horror of the forced march in 1838. Now, the Cherokee people did not take this lying down. They fought back, using the American legal system. They took their case all the way to the Supreme Court, and in the case Worcester v. Georgia, they won. Chief Justice John Marshall himself affirmed their sovereignty, ruling that Georgia's state laws had zero power inside Cherokee territory. It was a clear, stunning legal victory.
But it didn't matter. In a shocking move that created a genuine constitutional crisis, President Andrew Jackson simply ignored the Supreme Court's ruling. The executive branch just openly defied the highest court in the land.
The result was the Trail of Tears, the forced removal of the Cherokee and other tribes. The human cost was just catastrophic. Of the 16,000 Cherokees who were forced to march west, more than 4,000 died from disease, from starvation, and from exposure along the way.
But it is so important to remember that this was never, ever a story of passive acceptance. Resistance was widespread, and it was courageous. Leaders like Cherokee Chief John Ross fought tirelessly through legal and political means. Figures like Tecumseh tried to build powerful multi-tribal alliances to resist. Others, like the Sauk leader Black Hawk, fought back with military force. And some Cherokee even resisted by hiding in the mountains, and their descendants are who form the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians today.
So, as we start to wrap this up, it's crystal clear that these two stories, the political battles in Washington and the tragedy of westward expansion, were never really separate at all.
You see, the fights over the bank, tariffs, and internal improvements, that was all about defining the power of the American government. And at the same time, the drive for expansion and the policy of Indian removal, that was about defining its borders. These two conflicts were happening together, forging the nation's identity and leaving behind legacies and consequences that we're absolutely still grappling with today. This entire era really forces us to look at a question that never seems to go away, that tension between so-called national growth and its very real human cost. So the thought I want to leave you with is this. When we face similar conflicts in our own time, economic progress versus human rights or environmental costs, what lessons can we pull from this period to help us navigate our own complex, difficult challenges?